Thank you, Speaker. And I'm rising to speak on this housing motion because I'm really quite frustrated to hear the spruiking from the Labor government saying that they are getting on with building more houses, because frankly the reality is starkly different in South West Coast than what I am hearing in this chamber. The reality is that over 900 families are on a waiting list for housing in South West Coast. 900. And this government spruiks about how much money, millions of dollars, they're putting into the area for housing. Well, when I see women coming into my electorate office who have been reassured through public campaigns around the support they will get if they're victims of domestic abuse by the Andrews Labor government, the support they will receive, and they come in and they tell me that they are on the street or living in the car with their children. Sometimes I've even had a woman with 4 children sleeping in their car. And the organisations like St Vincent de Paul or the Salvation Army, who I might add, someone from our good Salvation Army community are down on the steps today, Lindsay Stowe, and I met with him earlier on the steps of Parliament. They do a fantastic job and they're so desperate to help people in this housing crisis and to get the government to listen to the fact that we need more social housing, not just the talk, but actually deliver on the promises that they've come all the way down here to protest on the steps and point out to the government that they are failing. But thank you to the organisations that do so much work, so much frustrating and very challenging hard work when you see the devastation and despair on people's faces that we see that come into our office saying, can you please help, we've got nowhere to go, we're getting kicked out of the hotel that we've been in or the caravan, or we've been offered a tent. These are the stories that they're just not able to be coped with from a point of view of even the staff at the Salvos, who must struggle like we do in our office because it's just too heart-wrenching. The government had an article in the Standard recently saying they built 75 homes. But the truth is, in 2017, this state had a collection of 86,813 homes on their books. The government owns the most homes for rental properties and manages these properties. By 2021, because we don't have any figures past then of the actual net situation, the figure was 86,887. After all the billions of dollars they have spent on this big build that we keep getting told so much about, that's an improvement of 74 homes. Just 74 homes. Now, there are 900 families. Now, families in our electorate are often 4 people, so that's a lot of people. Mum, dad, 2 kids is probably more normal than the 1.2 of the state average in South West Coast, would be my guess. And places like Terang, I don't think even have any houses, but we do have people trying to help. I met with the Women's Association, Housing Association, and they are building houses in Portland and Haywood. Midfield Meats, a local family-owned enterprise who do a lot for our community in a way of social good and philanthropy. They're actually trying to solve the problem themselves by building a housing complex for their workers, which will take the pressure off the housing market, whether it's rental, whether it's social housing, whether it's people trying to buy. There's a real supply issue. And my colleague at the table, the member for Kew, continually shares this with the government, that it is a supply issue and we need to actually do more to improve the supply. And when you get businesses like Midfield Meats who are going ahead and trying to do that, and they're held up by government regulation, instead of being supported and assisted on the process and making sure the permits are given where they need to be in a timely manner, or taking on board our suggestion, which we had as a policy before the last election, of a flying squad to go around and help the councils. We do have a challenge with accessing staff, and it makes sense to use centralised at times people like planning people in the council that can use the department's expertise, because it is very hard to attract people to the regions often, and when you don't have housing to attract them, the problem just continues to compound. So having that flying squad concept is something I think the government should be still taking up as an idea. It doesn't hurt to take up good ideas and swallow your pride sometimes and say that's a good one, we should adopt it, and then we can get a bit more land available, because places like Warrnambool, there just isn't the land available to be able to increase the supply. And the more roofs we have, the more homes we have, roofs over people's heads, that's where we start to really solve the problem. So, you know, it's time to stop just spinning the wheels on this spin that comes out of the government's mouth and actually start to deliver. You know, things like false promises, like Commonwealth Games, which, you know, we weren't going to get anything in the regions, but that doesn't, in South West Coast region from a Commonwealth Games perspective, because it was Ballarat, Bendigo and Geelong that were going to benefit mainly from our part of Victoria. But the reality is the legacy is something we do need that was promised, and these houses, we need them and we need them now. With the Commonwealth Games, those promises were meant to be delivered by 2026. The government needs to stick to that promise with the legacies and deliver by 2026. There's no reason and no excuse not to. The disappointment that the communities are struggling with as a result of, you know, the government being told they could have run the games for $1.4 billion, but insisted on 2.6, which they now claim to be 7, but won't evidence, when we have to pay $1 billion to now get out of contracts. So for 1.4 we could have had games, now we're getting nothing. It just economically doesn't add up, and that's what the problem is with this government. They don't understand economics. And having all the spin in the world can not take away from the fact that people are homeless and people are struggling. We have 9,900 people, when we were in government last, in 2014, we had 9,900 people on the priority waiting list. That was way too many, no question about that. But now, in March this year, it was 37,079 people on that priority waiting list for houses. Now, this is a government that's been in government for 20 of the last 24 years, and in that time the priority waiting list for families to go into housing has tripled. And this is a government who says they've been getting on with it and delivering for the community of Victorians, for people they care about, our most vulnerable. Well, I don't know how you can triple the homelessness figure and say you have been delivering. Just yesterday in the Parliament, the Deputy Premier was talking about all the work they had done to improve the situation, all the changes they'd made to legislation to improve the situation for renters. Well, the evidence is clear. There are less people being able to rent properties. They've failed. All those changes have clearly not worked because we are in a rental crisis. So I struggle to see when this government is going to realise that the smoke and mirrors is, the smoke's clearing and the mirrors are not really showing what they hope they'll see, because it's becoming too clear for everyone that the evidence is just landing at our feet. The evidence is just too clear. Rental crisis, when a government says they've done wonderful things to change legislation to improve that. Homelessness figures increasing. Priority housing lists tripling since we're in government till now. And this government uses the languages we've been getting on and delivering. Well, in South West Coast alone, we're in the top 50 areas of homelessness, with an increase in homelessness of 44%. That's not something to be proud of. So I really struggle with this motion that actually says we, as the Andrews Labor government, are doing a wonderful job delivering on social housing. I think it's a complete and utter failure, and that doesn't matter what I think. The evidence is in figures, and the figures have tripled. So that's quite clearly. It does matter what I think. Thank you for the member for South Gippsland. You're right, everybody is valuable, you're quite correct. But the reality is figures speak much more loudly than my words, and the figures are damning, especially the figure of 37,079 families that are on a priority housing list. So the government has failed our most vulnerable. The government who says they care clearly do not care. And those women who have been promised to be looked after if they're in a vulnerable situation, a domestic violence, and needing to leave that, have been absolutely failed. They need to stay in their communities. They need to stay in towns like Terang, but there just simply isn't the social housing to be able to assist them, and they've been let down. And this is not a government that cares. This is not a government that cares about our vulnerable. It's not a government that cares about our homeless people, and it is not a government that cares about women.
Call the member for